Welcome to the Hibbing Economic Development Authority regular meeting agenda. Today is March 10th, 2025, 5 p.m. Attendance, everyone in attendance tonight with the exception of Member Schweiberger. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Additions, deletions, approval of the agenda. Can we get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion made by Mayor Hyduk.
Second.
Supported by Member Hoffman-Sockman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes. The first one, approve the minutes of the regular and workshop meeting of the Hibbing Economic Development Authority for February 18th, 2025. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Member Egan,
Support.
supported by Mayor Hyduk. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. On to the consent agenda. Number 1, affirm the Economic Development Loan Fund as of February 28th, 2025 in the amount of $1,234,219.55. Number 2, approve the disbursements for the month of February in the amount of $468,770.85. Number 3, set the next regular and workshop meeting of Heda for Monday, April 14th, 2025 at 5 p.m. in the Hibbing City Hall Council Chamber. We get a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read and published.
Motion made by Member Hoffman-Sockman. Support. Supported by Member Cameron. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. On to the presentations. Director Olavanti.
Madam President, members of the board, tonight our first presentation is from Todd Erickson from Krause Anderson, and with backup support from our owner's rep, John Maxwell, here. And you have the presentation in your packet, and it will also be on the screen. Todd?
Thanks, Betsy. Good evening.
Hello.
All right, tonight we're going to talk safety, schedule, progress, budget status, and contingency status. Safety, we did have OSHA consultation meeting last week. Dave Fossum from the consultation group came out. We started with discussion in our office about what we were doing and how we were doing it. We did a job walk so he could watch our teams work, and then we finish up in the trailer with a closing consultation. So Dave found nothing to document. He said the project looked great. Pretty unusual, he said, to have 0 things to document, so we were happy for that. The schedule, the pre-engineered wall sheeting is installed. They're working on trim on the exterior. The roof sheeting was completed last Thursday. It's a huge monument for us. We struggled with that since late January. The mezzanine inside that'll be above the office, that steel should have completed today. They just had some welding to finish. We are inside with ground thaw machines, taking the frost out of the ground. The first phase that we did was in place for 2 weeks. We had that tested by Brown Engineering last week on Friday, and that area was frost-free, and so we moved it. Unfortunately, the area that we ground thawed was the only available area we had. It's not where we need to start with concrete. So the next phase, as soon as the frost is out, we will be able to start with underground mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that kind of stuff. So that ground thaw was placed last Friday, and we're going to test it at the end of the day tomorrow just to see. In addition to the ground thaw machines, we have heaters running inside the building. If you drive by, you'll see large heaters at the outsides of each one of the walk doors. We had a 1.4 million BTU heater and a 750,000 BTU heater initially to bring the building up to temperature, to warm up the concrete or warm up the steel and everything. And we've taken those off site to save some money, and we've got 4 550,000 BTU heaters that are running and keeping it at temperature in there. So the weather definitely impacted our project. We discussed that at the last meeting here. I've got a new update about the quantity of days. Underground will start, concrete will start as soon as the mechanical and electrical is completed underground. So, weather delays, we had, from our last meeting, we had quite a few more in February. We ended up losing a total of 13 days because of temperatures and or wind, and we lost 2 days in March up through last Friday. We had lost 32 days from either wind or temperatures, predominantly temperatures. John and I are working on that, of how we're going to address it. We're going to talk with Betsy on that in the next week or so, of how to address those. My biggest concern with that is, up front, we agreed to a completion date. 32 days is more than 6 weeks that we've been impacted, so we just want to make sure that your expectations are met. But to do that, we need to explain our story of how this weather has impacted us. And no matter how we do that, we are still working, we're pushing daily to find ways to recover schedule. That's why we're bringing in testing agents to test when the frost is out. We want to know the day it's out. We don't want to find out a week later, because we want to get people going. So, project schedule, you know, we're 6 months into a 10-month schedule, so we're 60% with our burn rate. Photos. This first picture isn't the greatest, but it was monumental for us, as I said, to get that roof on. So that's the best picture that I could get Friday afternoon. South side of the building that you can see from the road, all the siding is on. You can see in the middle there, one of those large heaters that's blowing into the space. The reason those heaters are outside is we don't want to put a combustion burning heater inside the building. It would introduce moisture. So by setting it outside like it is, you can see where the heater is sitting, and off to its left there is a hose. What that is bringing in fresh, dry air from outside, so we don't create moisture inside. So, budget status: 52% billed out as of February 28th, or $4,011,000. And contingency, we had a couple more items that went towards contingency. There was a few questions. Mayor Hyduk, I think you asked where we were as far as everything last time, so I put some percentages in there to make it a little bit easier to read. But, you know, the owner's contingency is about 25% expended, and the contractor's is about 40% expended. There's other things. Betsy gave me an item today that I'll note on there. There's a couple small change orders that are getting processed through, but it's not significant. If I back up, you know, we're 52% complete with the project, and we have spent 25% and 40% respectively of the contingencies. So we're in a great spot. So, any questions?
No, I have no questions.
Okay.
I'm just glad you're getting a break in the weather.
Glad what's that?
You're getting a break in the weather now.
I am too. This is a blessing.
And I know the roof was a big thing for you,
It was.
so you can contain your working environment, so.
Well, it was, you know, when we were doing ground thaw underground, that's taking the frost out, but we still couldn't pour concrete with the temperatures because you can't control it. It can't freeze from above. So we needed the roof to get heat in the space. So it's all, we're now to a point that we can predict a little bit. It was very unpredictable without a roof, so. Thank you.
I have a question. Sorry. Just going back, looking at your weather delays, you addressing that we'll be changing an upcoming change order. We look at that change order to be an addition to the
Excuse me?
contract. Are we going to be spending more money because of that change order for the weather delays?
Yeah, so in
Like
the
you have the heaters and everything else, I'm sure that's an extra cost, or was that part of the original bid?
The heat is one thing. The heat there was a budget for winter heat. So that goes against Kraus-Anderson's budgets that are already included. The contract extension, we discussed up front, And the temperature we put in there was 5 degrees or lower, was a non-work day. So the cost associated with that would be the Kraus-Anderson general conditions for my time, my superintendent, his truck, and the office trailer, that kind of stuff. The good thing about that, the comfort level for your team is the contract was negotiated with 100% give back. So we'll, as John and I negotiate that and bring it to Betsy, there will be a cost associated with the extended time, but anything not spent is given back.
Right.
So
Okay,
it'll
thank you.
essentially be a shift from owner contingency bucket to the contractor general conditions bucket, but they all get given back at the end if not spent anyhow. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
And Madam President, members of the board, just to finish on with Todd's presentation, the master project budget is behind the schedule or behind the presentation in there. And it includes this time, all of the change orders since the start of the project and what that total amount is from the owner's contingency. All right, so that's all in there now so that you can see that.
114.
Yep, and I gave that last one to John today, or to Todd today,
Okay.
to add to his so that he knows where I'm at.
All right.
All right.
Very good, thank you.
Excellent. So with that completed, we now have Betsy Michaels from the Trellis Group here to present the Android Rehabilitation Project. And while she's getting set up there technology-wise, the decision items for her project will come a little bit later in the agenda, during the board reports section, and it will be 2A, 1, 2, and 3. So she's presenting now, and we'll take up the items after that. So we're getting switched over to the screen there, and her presentation is also in your packet as well, because there was quite a bit of information this time. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to look it over over the weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, excellent. This project has been many months in the making. We've been working diligently with the Android project with Trellis since I started in June of 2022, and they secured their funding at the end of 2023. And Betsy is bringing back then some of the details about that funding and how that financing needs to work today, and a couple of other lingering items from the original development that she's going to present to you all today.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. Just wanted to give a few more details and updates since the last meeting. And then I have a few other items. So just to go over the timeline, scope of work, and the financing, I'll start with our project schedule. We intend to have our initial transfer of the ownership April 1st, 2025. I'll get into more detail about what that means, but that is our driving timeline in order to complete the financial closing, the exterior work, and the interior of the work by the end of 2025. This timeline, completing construction in 2025, is really important to the investor we're working with in order to preserve the amount of money that they're coming into the project with. Finally, we're looking to stabilize the project early 2026. So it did provide the full bid set of documents of drawings last month. And so if you were able to take a look at that and have questions, I can answer those. But in general, the building exterior work will be doing siding repair. That includes tuck pointing the brick, doing repairs to the terracotta. There are clay tiles that need repair. There's wood work that needs repainting. This work will also include window repair, so that'll be a full window restoration. So we'll be keeping the original historic windows, But there is existing lead-based paint that will need to be removed, and then all the stashes will be replaced, so they'll lift really nicely. Drafts will be sealed up. Finally, on the exterior, we will be relighting and repainting the historic sign. That'll come down be lifted down from the building, scrubbed, painted, and then relit with LED lighting. And we're working with a sign shop that has done a numerous amount of historic lighting. Notably, the Grain Belt beer sign in Minneapolis, they worked on that. On the inside of the building, we will be rehabbing all of the dwelling units. So they'll be getting new flooring materials, cabinets, countertops, bathroom fixtures, light fixtures, appliances. So a full kind of makeover there. And then in the common areas, we'll just be upgrading all of the flooring, painting everything, and getting new furniture, and putting in a fitness room for residents. So this is the project budget. Starting with the sources. The main funding source for this project are low-income housing tax credits and historic tax credits. We receive the tax credits after we complete the work on the building, and the more work we do, the more tax credits we get. Then we'll be selling these tax credits to an investor who in return gives us the capital we need to fund the project. The other sources are a Minnesota Housing Finance Agency loan and a Trellis sponsor loan, as well as a grant from the AEOA. All of these project sources are considered secured. This is the project budget. There will be an acquisition of the building. The hard construction costs are $8.3 million. That includes our construction contingency and our general contractor fee. Professional fees are a little over $1 million. That includes our architect, legal, and environmental reports, financing fees. This money is what we call very expensive money. So there are a lot of fees related to it. Lots of interest on the construction loan, which will be used between the time of financial closing and the end of construction when we receive the tax credits. And then finally, we will be setting up the project to be secure for the next 30 years, which means putting in place project reserves, including operating, replacement, and supportive services funds. So that final $700,000 will be there to make sure that if there are any shortfalls in rental revenue or rental subsidy, that we have a nice cushion to go back on. So because the Android is funded with the low-income housing tax credits, there are a lot of kind of strange and complicated rules that come along with it. So like I mentioned, the tax credits are awarded by Minnesota Housing. They are very involved in all of the compliance pieces of this, and they will remain involved for the next 30 years. They are awarded based on our construction amounts, as well as things like architect fees, environmental reports, and that's all what we call eligible basis. After we receive the tax credits, we'll sell them to an investor, and those cash proceeds will pay the construction costs. And the reason why this is important is because a loan forgiveness is considered a reduction in eligible basis. So the amount of tax credits we receive go down if we receive loan forgiveness, which means we receive less funds for the project. So in order to avoid this decrease in eligible basis, we request that the loan be forgiven prior to the transfer of the property to the new partnership entity, and I'll get into that as well. So that transfer is based on, again, the requirements of the low-income housing tax credit. The low-income housing tax credit requires us to sell the property to another unrelated, newly formed partnership entity that will involve the new investor, and then Trellis will remain the general partner. And this new partnership must be a for-profit entity, which means that the loan forgiveness is also a taxable event. So in order to avoid the loan forgiveness taxes, that forgiveness must be, it must occur prior to that sale. So putting dollars and cents to it, having the loan forgiveness occur after the transfer of the property to the new owner will decrease our tax credit cash proceeds by over $200,000 and then create over $100,000 in taxes owed. So instead of receiving a benefit of the $400,000, which the actual benefit is only now $39,000. And unfortunately, the way that we set up the project, and this is just something that wasn't caught by me, is that I don't have the $200,000 and the $100,000 to cover those costs, both the decrease in LIHTC proceeds and the $123,000 in taxes, which is why Trellis is requesting that the loan be forgiven prior to the sale versus after the sale. So I'm gonna pause there because that was a lot of information, and I would just like to give you a chance to ask questions.
Yeah, I do have one question.
Yeah.
When you talked about renovation, two components
Yes.
that have been issues, the heating system,
Yep.
boilers, and
Yes.
I mean, I would assume the boilers are being
Yes.
replaced?
Yep.
Okay.
All mechanical systems are being replaced.
Okay.
Yep.
And then they were having issues with the elevator.
The elevator is getting a full refurbishment.
Okay.
Mhm.
Those are just two important components
Yeah.
for those living in that building.
Yep, and the elevator will be, it's currently, in code for what it is.
Right.
But if it were put into a building now, it would be out of compliance. So
Right.
it'll be brought up to the newest standards.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good, thank you.
Mhm.
Madam President, I have a question. A couple questions.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the scope of work, are the graphics on the exterior of the building, are they going to be repainted?
No, and that was a question that a resident brought up at a meeting recently, and it's just not something that I had considered, and it's something I need to look into. So
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
'cause they're
as of
very-
now, it's not in the scope of work. And we are working with a historic consultant to make sure that everything we do is historic to the building that needs to be, because it's on the National Register. So I'm not sure what the rules are.
Okay, because I believe there are period dated advertisements on the side of that
Yeah.
building, so thank you for
Yeah.
checking on that before it's painted over. And
Yeah,
then-
oh, no, it
okay.
won't be painted
Or
over.
scrubbed off or
It-
whatever.
Right, I just
Okay.
don't know that I don't know if we are allowed to restore it. That's,
Okay,
and repaint it, to bring it you know,
back.
yeah.
Okay, right.
So that is something I need to look
Okay.
into.
Thank you for that. And then secondly, at the end of the day, is it a nonprofit that's owning the building?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, like, technically, it's really, so it'll be a for-profit partnership, and then there are, I should have done the org chart, and then there will be an investor that will be the limited partner. They kind of sit quietly, and just make sure that we maintain compliance with the low-income housing tax credit rules and regulations for 15 years. And the general partner will be a not-for-profit general partner, and Trellis will be the sole owner of that general partner. Trellis is a nonprofit, but per the rules of low-income housing tax credits, the ownership entity needs to be a for-profit.
so at the end of the day, the city of Hibbing will receive no property taxes on that property, correct?
We will pay property taxes, yeah.
Okay.
Is that, does it, it is a.
So help me understand this.
Is it tilt that you pay though, payment in lieu of taxes, or do you pay a full property tax on the assessed value?
We pay the
That's what you're asking?
Yes, thank you for that, yes.
Sure,
Yeah.
we pay the 4D tax rate.
Okay.
So as my understanding is it's not payment in lieu of taxes. We
Okay.
pay property taxes like a for-profit entity would.
And Trellis is still considered a nonprofit.
Trellis is a nonprofit, correct?
So how does that work then? I mean, if Trellis is a nonprofit and they're still paying the taxes, or they still pay property tax?
Yeah, because technically the owner of the building is still a for-profit. It's just, you just kind of trace down the tree of the org chart, and
Okay.
the controlling member is a nonprofit.
Okay.
So Trellis, the nonprofit, will be making all decisions for the for-profit partnership.
It's kind of
Thank you.
confusing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
that's something I can provide like a graphic on,
Okay, yeah,
if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, it would be, actually.
Okay.
And Madam President, members of the board, they do pay property tax currently because that's how we were able to abate it
Mhm.
on the initial project, right? So
Yeah.
it's always been somewhat of a tax-paying entity based on the structure that's been there for the last 30 years.
Okay.
My apologies,
I-
Member Eden.
No, that's fine. I have a question, but go ahead. And this is probably a question you can't answer, because I don't think anybody can. With the status of how the state is and the deficit that the state is in right now, you foresee any problem with the funding for the low-income house tax credit being over or under the amount that you show here?
That is a really good question. I don't foresee any trouble with the tax credit product. It's a partisan product that benefits nonprofits and for-profits alike. It really hasn't been something that is debated, and it's been stable for the last, since its inception, which is about 30 years ago, 35. Because of unknowns with tax legislature in general and the corporate tax rate, which the tax credit benefits from a higher tax rate. If tax rates go down, that affects our tax credit pricing. We did take a penny hit, which doesn't sound like a lot. It was about $150,000 in tax credit proceeds due to the uncertainty of just the state of tax reform and the unknowns there. But we are locked in with our investor now. So we are feeling confident moving forward, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions for Betsy?
She has the remainder of her presentation. Now, this is the next couple of items, but this is the big one, right?
This is,
So
yeah, the other ones are a little more straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're 30 years old, so it's just, again, some housekeeping items, but This one, so tonight, couple of things later on, when you look at the agenda items to vote on them, couple of things to keep in mind. Our initial resolution that dedicated the loan forgiveness as our local match said that they had to, we would invest that loan forgiveness at the end of the project when they had done all of the investment into the property, right? You can see now that they've secured the funding necessary for sources and uses. So at this time, there will be other folks watching to make sure that they invest all of those monies, including Minnesota Housing Finance and the for-profit investor. So at this time, the city doesn't probably need to hold that requirement anymore to ensure that the investment is made. So at this point, I'm confident, based on everything that Trellis has put forward with their scope of work and the plans, et cetera, that it will be something that you can consider tonight, and staff recommendation would be to waive that requirement, but still do the $400,000 prior to the financial closing to allow for this to happen in the most equitable fashion for those 48 units.
I have one more question, sorry. If we go ahead with the project and and the bidding process start, is there going to be any reference to local contractors to be able to bid and be successful in bidding for this project?
Yeah, so we have fully gone out to bid. The project's been bid. There is a local hiring preference. So anywhere where it was financially feasible to use local contractors, we did. We are working with our general contractor, who is Frericks Construction. They're based out of Vadnais Heights, I think, in the Twin Cities. We selected them because they are very experienced in doing occupied rehabs, which is a rehab where the resident remains in their unit. So we were really comfortable using them. But when they bid to subcontractors, there was a local hiring preference.
So this will be a prevailing wage project?
Yep, there's going to be state and federal prevailing wage.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was,
And member Egan, just so you're aware, members of the board, the Frericks Construction is also doing the HRA of Hibbing's project here as well. They're also the GC on that project. So they're well familiar with these types of projects. So they'll be doing a lot of work in town over the next couple of years.
I do have one more question, and I think you answered it.
Sure.
I was gonna ask how you're gonna deal with your residents.
Yeah,
And you just answered that question for me. I'm glad to hear that, because I didn't know how you were gonna balance that.
yeah, you know,
Renovation with the people actually living there.
and if I can expand on it a little bit, so Frericks is very good at the occupied rehabs. For the majority of the rehab, a resident will be able to remain in their unit. There are a couple of times where that will be a challenge or a choice for the resident. One is when the elevator is being repaired. It's going to be 8 days of the elevator being down, and we have a lot of residents that are unable, or it's not their preference to use the stairs. And so during those 8 days, Trellis will pay for a hotel off-site if a resident chooses to leave the building.
Okay. Nice option.
Yeah, so, and that'll cover, if they have to be out of their unit, meals will be covered, transportation will be covered.
Very good. Thank you.
And the residents are all aware of what's happening and
Yep, yeah.
the timeline.
They are aware. I think the last meeting that we had was probably 2 months ago, so they are due for an update, but
Yeah.
they are, I think, happy with the new site manager there. I've heard good things, good feedback. So she'll be keeping them aware as this kind of long wait occurs before the construction starts. And then Frericks will be taking the lead on communications during construction. So they'll always know, when they'll be entering their unit, what to expect for the day, that sort of thing, as construction goes on.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Are you ready for her to proceed then?
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
excellent.
So the first kind of housekeeping item is something on our title work. It's an existing contract for private redevelopment. that is recorded against the property. It's dated 1993. The contract was made between Hibbing and the original owner of the building. And it basically was just a contractual obligation to complete the rehab in 1994, which was successful. So I am just requesting that this contract be released from the property.
Okay.
And does anybody have questions about that? Okay. The second item, and Betsy, I didn't see this in the agenda, so I may have,
The quitclaim deed?
yeah, maybe I
Restriction?
missed it.
Okay.
So on the quitclaim deed, there is this statement, if you can read that. If the renovation of the Android Hotel is not completed by December 6, 1995, the property shall revert to, and title shall revert and revest in the city of Hibbing. So because the rehab was complete, we are just asking that this language be stricken from the quitclaim deed. Our attorneys have never seen this before, so we're trying to figure out what the mechanics are behind striking that language, but it would require the city of Hibbing's approval.
Madam President, members of the board, I had referred that one to Attorney Borland last week, and he said because it was written between the city and the Android Limited Partnership, that the city would have to allow the reversion to be suffice, or whatever you said. So that's why it's not on the EDA agenda, because we can't affect that change.
Okay,
Am I speaking correctly there, Attorney Borland?
Correct.
Okay.
got it, thank you.
So I believe that's on the city council agenda for tomorrow.
Oh,
And,
okay, okay.
yeah,
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
yeah, it's Wednesday.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll move on from that. So finally, I just wanted to share again, to reiterate that Trellis is really committed to owning and operating the Android for the long term. We are doing all of this work because the property needs stabilization, the building needs it, and that's our mission, is to own and operate quality, affordable housing. Second, we commit to collaborating with Heda and Boomtown to make sure that the Android ballroom space remain a valuable community asset. It is not a part of this rehab project because of the type of financing that we were able to secure. We can't use it for non-housing spaces, but that doesn't mean that we're not also committed to figuring out how to make that space work for the community. And then finally, I would like to offer, as we discussed last month, just my availability to continue giving construction updates or project updates as the project goes on. That's what I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
talking
Very
to
nice.
us, and
Thank you.
yeah,
Are there-
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any final questions for me?
No other final questions for Betsy?
Right, very thorough, nice job.
Very good.
Yes,
Yeah, you
yes,
answered all the
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. All right, so moving on, the item 3 on presentations is the Jefferson School redevelopment project update. We have a topic that we will take up in closed session, so at this time I will not update on that project. And the same thing with the 400 block redevelopment. We have a closed session item on that tonight. So to talk about negotiations for those properties. Going forward, I will keep those as a standard on there because the likelihood that we have negotiations occurring every single meeting is going to be unlikely. So just a heads up on that. And so, Madam President, I will cede the agenda back to you.
Okay, then we can move on to the board reports. So we can move on to Cassie.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the board. I handed out an updated loan balance schedule as of today for you all to review. Just a few things to note. The 2 libation station Damjanovic loans were discharged in bankruptcy, so they are no longer collectible by Heda. We received $15,000 from Security State Bank for giving the satisfaction of mortgage on the property. The $15,000 was applied to the 2 notes in equal amounts. We then wrote off the note receivable for the remaining loan amounts, which totaled $38,816.41. Both of Moxie's loans are past due for January, February, and March. I sent an email to Moxie on February 26th asking for an update, and I did not receive a response. And then just another update, 2 of the deferred loans reached 1 year of the deferred loan program, so I will be reaching out to each of them for an update on the loan requirements. And then, as of today, we have a fund cash balance between the 3 funds of $1,353,816.77. We have $124,885.51 still outstanding that people need to submit project invoices for, giving a balance to lend of $1,228,931.26. Does anyone have any questions?
I thought the owner of the Red Rock had an insurance policy.
Madam
Am I
President,
missing
members-
something here? Did you, the loan for the Red Rock? I thought that was guaranteed with, or had a life insurance policy with it.
Member Hoffman Sockman, yes, it does. Would you like them to list that on here in the same way as we list the other policy?
I think so, yes,
Okay.
thank you.
We have 2 other loans that have insurance policies required on them, correct?
I know the Red Rock for sure, and then I'd have to check on,
Mr. Hanson?
Yes, Mr. Hansen's.
Mhm.
okay.
I think so. That'd be great, thank you.
Yeah. And then, Madam President, if I may, Attorney Borland, did you have an update from the Arrowhead motorcycle letter that you sent out?
So Cassie needed to get me a little bit more information, so I'm anticipating there'll be service of process to try and locate them and serve them within the week.
Okay.
That'll start their timeline running to respond. If they fail to respond, we'll be seeking relief from the court.
Okay. And do you want us to take any further action at this time on the Moxie loans?
What
What
might
would be our
that,
next
yeah, what it would look like.
So, Madam President, members of the board, I think back in December, I think I wrote a demand letter. It seemed to prompt an immediate response and got Moxie current with regard to at that particular moment, but it's stopped as of then. So you choose whether you want another demand letter, and that would be the step to probably take, because in fact, you can show the court if you needed to that you made a demand letter, and whether or not they responded or not. If they didn't respond, then you could proceed with action, showing that you've declared the whole amount due, because once again, they're in default. So,
Yes, I think it's vital that we do the next step, and we do it, quickly, instead of
Okay.
letting it fester and keep going. And then how about our rock and rollers? I know that was the judgment sent to collections.
so I think that was referred to Range Credit Bureau to collect. So it's whatever they're able to collect.
Okay, we haven't heard anything from them.
I don't get any of that information. It
Okay.
would be coming to the city.
And we have received multiple payments from RCB on behalf of Rock and Rollers.
Oh, you have? Oh, okay.
We just
all right.
received one today. So.
Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, does anybody else have any questions on the update for Cassie? Okay, thank you. Now we can move on to number 2, back to Director Alavanti.
Excellent. Madam President, members of the board, item 2A is to consider the trellis request. First, to rescind the resolution to forgive the $400,000 loan with condition of project completion. That resolution was 230504.
So are we doing these in 3 separate pieces? under
We do
D?
have to, yes.
Madam Chair, hearing what was said tonight and the straightforward approach that Trellis gave, I'll make a motion to rescind resolution 2023-0504.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion?
Support.
So we have a motion made by Mayor Hyduk and supported by Vice President Jaranis. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. On to number 2.
Item number 2 is a request to pass Resolution 250302 to forgive the $400,000 loan prior to project financial closing for Trellis.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor made by Mayor Hyduk to forgive the $400,000 loan prior to the project financial closing. Do we have a second?
Support.
Supported by Vice President Jaranis. Any further discussion?
Excuse me, I have one question. Do we have to give this in order for them to get the financial package put together?
So the
So why are we
financial,
doing it then?
sorry, Member Egan, Madam President, the financial package was put together on based on that forgiveness already. The problem is that when they sell it to the investor, then without the financial closing done after the loan forgiveness, that for-profit entity has to pay taxes on that forgiveness because it's considered a grant, and it will also reduce the eligible basis because they will, of course, take in all grants first, and therefore the eligible construction costs are reduced by a grant prior to any construction loans. So it does affect their financial position for the project, and as she said, she did not build into the project then the additional $100,000 worth of taxes plus the reduce in basis. So she would have to go find that other $300,000 then in project financing. And at this stage, that's almost impossible to find.
So the 400,000 is actually a loan, not a grant.
It was a grant, as how we considered it. We're forgiving the loan. It was a loan from 30 years ago. The problem is, as it comes into the project, loan forgiveness looks grant-like. And so then it causes these financial hiccups in their process. I've already been talking about it with Jackie's project, so we will see these exact same requests again for the funds that we're gonna contribute into her project, coming through with the exact same language.
And this was a CDBG
Grant,
funding from the
yeah.
county, so
Right.
it wasn't city funding.
Right.
Right.
It
Right,
was
they
funneled
will-
through us, but it came through the county. And it does save them money on the project. That's why they're requesting this.
Correct. The CDBG grant was given by St. Louis County, and we've already received their okay to do this as well, back in 2023.
I mean, it would have been nice to have that information.
Oh, sure.
It's not on here. It just says we have a $400,000 loan. That's
Correct.
the question.
My apologies, Member Egan, it was all done a year ago before you got your seat here on this board, so my apologies trying to bring you along in some of that very in-depth conversation. I didn't put that original RCA that had all of that detail for the motion that we just rescinded. So next time I'll try and have that along with the prior motion so you can see all of that detail. They will be paying back the $77,000 plus interest that was lent to them by Heda, and that will be coming back in, and then we will send that into Jackie's project, which has already been through the EDA board, so. All right.
Okay, we do have a motion, and we do have a second. No other further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Number 3.
Excellent. This is a request then to release the 1993 contract for a private development agreement between the Hibbing Economic Development Authority and the Android project.
So moved.
Motion made by Member Egan,
Support.
supported by Member Hoffman Sockman. Is there any further discussion?
Madam President,
Jen?
so does any of this stuff that we just did, do we need to do the quitclaim deed first with the city of Hibbing, with the city council? Should that have come first before we done all of these things?
Not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily.
They're all title issues that are hamstringing travel. So the reversionary interest, that's all that the city needs to say, is that we're not going to take it back now. You've already forgiven these other issues anyway.
Okay.
So it was just it was there in case this thing fell flat 30 years ago. It didn't, but
Okay.
it's still within their title to it.
Okay,
It's
I
just a
just-
cleanup item now.
Wanted to make sure we were doing it in the right order, so thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, no other further discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. On to B.
Excellent. Item 2B is a request to approve Resolution 250301 to apply for and accept Local Housing Trust Fund state matching funds. That resolution is in your packet tonight, and we have been working on this Local Housing Trust Fund with the city since February of 2024, so over a year now. And the city created ordinance 440A Series 2, which created the fund and referred to the Hibbing Economic Development Authority for administration of the fund. Over the past year, then, we have developed the process and policy and the accepted applicants for the fund, which are AEOA for their owner-occupied rehab projects, the North St. Louis County Habitat for Humanity and their projects in town, and then the HRA of Hibbing for any of their projects coming up. And the city, or the Hibbing Economic Development Authority, committed $150,000 of our undesignated fund, the 255 undesignated fund balance, should these matching funds be secured. So at this time, the application process has opened up for the EDA to apply for state matching funds, and this resolution is required to apply for and accept those funds should we be awarded.
So do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Member Hoffman-Sockman,
I'll support, Madam Chair.
supported by Mayor Hyduk. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. C.
Sorry, one moment, I'm catching up on my notes here to make sure I have this. Excellent. Item C then is a request to approve the agreement for demolition bid and construction services on the 400 block demolition in the amount not to exceed $25,000. I have been working to secure 2 quotes on that particular work, one from LHB and one from Bar Engineering. I've received 1 quote in thus far, and I'm waiting for the second one. So if I can get a not to exceed for the $25,000 for that particular part of the project, I can proceed as soon as I receive the second quote. I will also follow up with an email letting you know what both amounts were and who came in with the lowest quote.
Do we have a motion to approve the agreement for the demolition bid?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Vice President Drainus,
Support.
supported by Member Cameron. Is there further discussion?
What is your time frame on this, Betsy?
So, Mayor Hyduk, good question. Right now, I need to get the entire bid spec developed and the parcel defined. We do have the survey done, so that's one step. It will take a little bit to get the entire spec and then send it out for bid, but because it's over that $175,000, that's the right way to go about it. I am slow walking this just a little bit due to the fact that we have some other developments on that particular block with the remnant parcel. And I want to make sure that I don't go forward with a project and then have to do a revision or a change order to the project that's a little bit more costly if I can do it right from the beginning. So I may have a bid alt in there.
What buildings are included in this?
So far in the bid spec, it's the 408 through 416. So that's the empty block, the 412, the flower basket, and the Ace Hardware.
So all 3.
Mhm.
We're less than 25?
That's the bid spec, and the construction
To put the
support
bids together.
services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The entire amount that we received for the demolition is 407,000 in a grant, and then an additional 21,000. So the abatement and the demo is roughly around that 440,000.
So the process as far as the bidding, that will include taking the buildings down, getting rid of all the debris, and then backfilling, refilling all the basements and all that?
To
Or how's it gonna end?
so to a level, buildable lot. Basically, it'll be shovel ready.
The only reason I ask, I have experience in this.
Yes, I know you do.
And, the biggest concern was that the ground after the building was demolished, and I'm talking about the old Moose building, that the surface had to be brought up to the code that required for any building to be processed on there. That's what they had to meet, so
Yes,
that's what I'm asking.
yes, and we're working with reputable vendors who will ensure that that is done. So, yeah, thank you for that question.
Okay, we do have a motion, we do have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we can move on to D, and that would be our closed session. So I would like to, I guess, entertain a motion to go into a closed session. We will have 4 separate closed sessions, but they all pertain to the same concept, so we should only need the one motion, correct?
One motion, correct, and have 4 separate closed sessions.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, I'll make the motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Okay, we do have a motion made by Mayor Hyduk and a second by Member
Second,
Egan.
thank you.
Any further discussion? I will list all 4 of these closed sessions right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Madam President, yes.
Okay, the first one is going to be a closed session number 1. It's going to be parcel 140-0270-00855, 2810 Diane Lane in Hibbing, Minnesota, 55746. Number 2, closed session number 2 will be 140-0070-01450, 402 East Howard Street, Hibbing, Minnesota, 55746. Closed session number 3 is parcel 140-0070-01480. The second is 140-0070-01500. The next one is 140-0070-01510. And the final one is 140-0070-01520. That's the 408 through 416 on East Howard Street, Hibbing, Minnesota, 55746. And then the closed session number 4 will be parcel 140-0270-00337. And that's 1111 7th Avenue East, Hibbing, Minnesota, 55746. So we do have a motion, we have a second to go into the closed session.
And Madam President, just to clarify, and these are all discussing these pieces of real estate for the purposes of potentially selling those parcels.
Okay. Thank you,
Selling
Andy.
or purchasing.
Right.
Thank you for adding that. So we have a motion, we have a second, no further discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We can go into closed session. We are back from our closed session. We can move on to the letter E, which would be to authorize the staff to enter into negotiations for the
yeah.
sale of 2810 Diane Lane.
Madam President, I would request that you authorize me to enter into negotiations for the potential sale of 2810 Diane Lane, concluding our successful purchase agreement at the end of July with Sunrise Bakery.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I'll
Mo-
support.
Motion made by Member Egan and supported by Mayor Hyduk. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. On to F.
Yes, I would request authorization to enter into negotiations for the purchase of 402 East Howard Street, as directed in closed session tonight.
Correct.
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Member Hoffman Sockman,
Support.
supported by Member Cameron. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Excellent, Madam President. The next item is I would request authorization to negotiate a pre-development agreement for the 400 block redevelopment project as directed in closed session tonight.
So moved.
Motion made by Member Egan,
All support?
supported by Mayor Hyduk. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
And the final item is I would request approval for the purchase agreement with JT Ventures LLC Yoder Building Supply for 1,111 7th Avenue East for, as presented tonight, for the amount of $700,000.
Make that motion.
Motion made by Vice President Drainus,
Second.
supported by Member Egan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so that concludes our board reports for tonight. We can move on to our discussion items. Number one is going to be our board training. Heda enabling the resolution. I don't know if that's you or if that's, is that?
So a couple of the first items are me, and the open meeting law is Attorney Andy Borland, and then I will take over back at the conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to put in front of you all as a reminder and as new for the new board members, Resolution number 230301 is the resolution that was passed by City Council in 2023, modifying the resolution establishing the Hibbing Economic Development Authority. It refers to the state statutes that govern the work that you all do. It refers to the TIF districts that the EDA was authored to administer. We are all the way to TIF number 12, which is for the Hampton Hotel at this time, and is still continuing. Maturity date of 2036, as you can see on page 3 of 6, item H. It talks about that the City Council assigns certain documents and things to the EDA to administer. As you saw, the Local Housing Trust Fund was created in ordinance with the city and referred over to the EDA. That is definitely something that happens through this document. We will be authorized to administer any new TIF districts. That's item 10 on page 4 of 6, which we have been working towards establishing a TIF district for the 400 block redevelopment. You're all aware of that. That would probably be TIF number 13. Let's see here. So we report back to the City Council through the liaison, myself, to for budget purposes and for any other projects as the City Council and the EDA either share funding on or share authority on. The staff liaison, myself, and the finance director and Attorney Borland bring information back to City Council so they're aware and are apprised of any joint projects that are coming through. And let's see here. And that's all for the enabling resolution. It also provides for remuneration and for that to be decided each year per the budget. So any questions on the enabling resolution or what authority the EDA does its work in the city under? All right, excellent. Next item in your packet then is the bylaws of the Hibbing Economic Development Authority. These were written and passed as of, I have a date here, as of May 1st, 2023 by the resolution of the authority. And it talks through the name, the scope of the authority, how folks are seated. There's council members and at-large members. It talks through that the term of the at-large members shall be 6 years with a maximum service of 12 consecutive years. City council policy and process shall govern eligibility, with addition of a couple of items. So one, they must be eligible members to vote in the city of Hibbing, which means that you have a residence here and you're over 18. That is city council policy. And then the EDA's policy is that at-large members may not be staff of the city or organizations supported by a city levy or a legislative advocacy organization operating in the city of Hibbing. Initial tenure for the commission at the enactment of the bylaws shall be staggered for the at-large members and done via motion at the same time. And what the authority did at that time, because the members' terms were already staggered, we did not restart them at 0, but we just continued them on as they had already been seated. So any tenure prior accrued and was present at the time of the enactment of these bylaws. And then members whose terms are expiring shall remain seated until they are replaced at the next regular meeting. And we did that particular item to ensure that we didn't ever have to operate with a board that was under the majority number of members needed to operate to ensure a quorum. There is a monthly stipend, which is provided for in section 3, which is negotiated as part of the city's budget. Attendance, commissioners are expected to attend all regularly scheduled meetings, and if members miss a meeting, the absence will be reported to the president of the authority. So that is one item I just wanted to clarify for folks. If they are going to miss a meeting, if you could email myself, and I can notify Sherry, or email Sherry and she will notify the board, I would appreciate that. I know in the past folks notified Candy, but Candy is no longer seated at this board on a regular basis, so myself or Sherry are the appropriate people to notify on that. So that way we know for sure if we're gonna have a quorum instead of wondering at the last second. I would appreciate that. It does say that consecutive or cumulative absences of more than 3 in a calendar year may result in removal from the authority, and such removal will require a simple majority. We don't have that come up real often. That is just one of the items that was a holdover from city policy in the past, but we haven't really had that item come up. So it's there, but just something to note. Officers shall elect a president and a vice president annually, which we do every year. A commissioner may not serve as president and vice president at the same time, and city council members may not serve as officers of the authority. So the vice president and the president will always be members at large, per the bylaws. And then it talks about the duties, and if there's a vacancy, how that can be filled is in section 5. The community development director or designee of the city administrator shall serve as the executive director of the authority. That's section 6. Additional personnel, we have our attorney and also our city accountant here tonight, which is valuable. Let's see. We have regular meetings, we have special meetings. It talks about how those can be called. We have a quorum conversation in here on Article 4, Section 3. 4 members constitute a quorum for conducting business and exercising the power, but a smaller number may adjourn from time to time until a quorum is obtained. We've had that happen recently. When a quorum is in attendance, action may be taken by the authority upon a vote of the majority of the commissioners, except as otherwise set forth in these bylaws, and proxy voting is not permitted. One matter that requires a super quorum or a 2/3 majority is any financial matters. So voting on accepting purchase agreements or expending funds, et cetera, always requires a 2/3 majority. So that is one special note that we have in our bylaws about those. We do examine the financial statements from the city finance office. They bring that every meeting. And our Heda loan and our revolving loan fund is always examined at every meeting. And we do present a budget to the city council to continue doing our business. We do have an executive committee and a budget and finance committee. which are standing committees, and then any others that we need are ad hoc. And the EDA authority can appoint those as needed. We do ensure our board members against errors and omissions covered by the city, and indemnify former or present commissioners of this authority. And then we do have bonding and levy authority in this particular board. So the authority is authorized to work with city council on any of those activities. And then Article 9, Section 1 and 2 talks about the conflict of interest. So an annual conflict of interest statement will be completed by each member on the authority and filed per normal city practice. I asked Candy if she had collected those yet this year. She indicated she had not. So it's in your packet tonight for you to review and sign, and I'll collect those and bring those back to our city clerk to file per city process. And then section number 2 says no interested commissioner may vote or lobby on a matter to be counted in determining the existence of a quorum for the issue upon which the authority is voting upon. So that just means if you're going to have a vested interest in a project that's coming before the authority, you may not weigh in on the matter under consideration, nor may you vote on it. And we request that you declare the conflict prior to the item coming up. Member Kivila used to do that with projects that he was going to perform services towards, and it was a great way to understand that he would not be weighing in or voting on that matter. Any questions on that? It also provides a section on how we will amend, and it would require a 2/3 majority of the members. Any questions on that? All right, excellent. So then I'll turn the rest of this over to Attorney Borland.
So, Madam President, members of the board, 1C is mine, and that's open meeting law discussion. So this is a document I put together. It's not specific as to the Economic Development Authority. It covers any public body, always falls under the premise of this. So Minnesota has a law that presumes that all meetings that a public body have should be open to the public to review. So you're clear, that doesn't mean the public gets to speak at every open meeting. It means that the public should be able to witness and observe business of the city or the Economic Development Authority, whatever that entity might be, how they're conducting business to make sure that things aren't happening behind closed doors, so to speak. In my packet, section 3 here, it discusses briefly what is a meeting. The Supreme Court has given a definition of that, a gathering of a quorum of the body to discuss business of that entity. So Hibbing, unfortunately, is notorious because we're most famous for having a Supreme Court case over an open meeting violation. And those were serial violations back in the 1990s of our city council because they had discussed city business where there was no exceptions to the open meeting law for what they were discussing, and they literally taped them, so it wasn't like they're really trying to hide the ball because everyone got to hear the tapes later. But they were violated, and they were removed from office, a number of the city councilors were, because they had multiple violations. So Hibbing is more well aware of that problem than maybe a lot of communities are. There are exceptions to every rule, and there's exceptions to the open meeting law. There's a section as to what meetings that the body may close, labor negotiations and strategies, performance evaluations of individuals. The caveat to that, though, is let's say, for instance, at the end of each year, the city council evaluates this performance evaluation of the city administrator. But if the city administrator wanted to, he could say, I want to have that in an open meeting. That's his right. So he doesn't have to have it in a closed session, but the council may close it. So that's the situation. You have to state on the record why you're closing, and in performance evaluations, you have to preserve those records for up to 3 years. preservation of the records depends on the type of reason why you're closing it, so that varies. And then for an evaluation of individual, that public body must state what its conclusions were of the evaluation at the next open meeting that it has. Attorney-client privilege, that's another reason that you can go into closed session. Typically, it's pretty safe for the attorney to say, if litigation has been started, you can definitely go into a closed session. It's a little bit of a gray zone because sometimes you say, well, we're planning to defend, we're about to get sued, or we know we're going to bring an action. Getting advice or providing advice to the body is generally allowed. Those aren't taped. A body has no obligation to tape a meeting in which they're getting legal advice on strategy with regard to litigation. Otherwise, the other side could ask for that information constantly and say, I want your tape of that. So that, practically speaking, the other side could learn your strategy throughout. Purchases of real and property, you've experienced that this evening. We went through the process of going into closed session for the purposes of real property transactions. If there were security measures, as in, let's say Mr. Brzezinski wanted to present information to the council some evening with regard to security for City Hall, and he could have the right to go into closed session to discuss those issues with the council to get advice. Those are all the ones that may be closed. Then you have the ones that must be closed. Allegations of misconduct against an employee. Those must be closed unless, of course, that person for some reason elects that they'd like to have them out in the open. Those meetings, again, have to be electronically recorded and kept for 3 years. If a body decides that there's going to be discipline after that closed session, every subsequent meeting that takes that up, though, has to be open. So you could have where the city council sanctioned Betsy, we'll pick on her, and said, we're going to discipline you. If Betsy said, okay, then, but I'm going to exercise my right to say, I want the rest of these meetings in the open to discuss what you're saying about me. She has the right to do that, okay? She doesn't have to. She could keep them enclosed, but she has the right as an employee to have them open. Where there's public data that could be of a criminal nature, and specifically criminal sexual conduct, things with regard to that, domestic abuse, if there's allegations with regard to that or data about that, you have the right to go into closed sessions with regard to those to discuss those issues. Internal affairs allegations involving law enforcement, misconduct, and so forth. Also, educational, health, medical, and welfare data. You have the right to go into a closed session to discuss those. The body does. Certain medical records also have the right to go into closed session to discuss those. Just some common issues that often comes up for public bodies, interviewing of candidates. So if the city or Heda wanted to interview someone to hire them, if the body is interviewing, it's an open meeting because it's the body doing it, okay? There's no basis under the law to say, well, yeah, but we're interviewing this person on it. No, so oftentimes groups will intentionally limit the number of that public body that are going to do the interviewing. They might ask other people to join as well, but we're only going to have 2 people, members of the council, or 3 members of the council. Keeping it under a quorum, that's perfectly fine to do. So the council isn't then doing the interviewing, thus there's no open meeting violation there. Informational meetings. So if the city is getting an informational meeting with regard to the city, they should notice that as a council meeting. As compared to, we're going to go attend the League of Minnesota Cities on open meeting law or data privacy or something like that. That's generic. That's not specific to our city. That's generic information. So if people are making presentations, but they're not specific as to Heda, for instance, you don't have an issue. But if someone's coming to present to say, I want to talk about development in some part of town, and you're all there, well, that's a meeting of the Economic Development Authority. Chance gatherings, though, you all go to the movie theater to watch Mr. Egan and I sit in the theater and comment on our favorite film. That's not a violation of open meeting law. You're free to go where you want to go within the town because you haven't coordinated it to go. Oftentimes you'll see our city council, though, if there's events that they're aware of that are going to come up in the community, the council oftentimes will say, we authorize or allow the city councilors to attend those things that they know aren't necessarily always sponsored by the city, but they're events that maybe the city have been invited to attend, a ribbon cutting, an opening, groundbreaking, things like that. So the close to the end of my meeting, and serial meetings. Mr. Egan wants to meet with the mayor, and the president wants to meet with Jennifer Hoffman-Sockman, and Steve wants to meet with Celia. And then Steve's gonna meet with Mike, and then Steve's gonna meet with, okay. You're having meetings to discuss issues, you don't have a quorum, but you're intentionally essentially exchanging information with a larger than a quorum body by doing those small things to draw a consensus. Or if I said, well, I'm gonna reach out to Mike Egan to get his view on this issue, then I'm gonna get to the mayor's issue. Okay, you're polling that group to get a consensus. You're pushing the open meeting law again, because you're intentionally doing an end run around it with smaller groups to get the same answer. Finally, and this is a issue that's continuing to move, is the whole issue with regard to using emails, with regard to your city business. Your emails that discuss city business are fair game for data practices. So if Councillor Hoffman-Sockman emails the mayor over an Economic Development Authority issue or a City of Hibbing issue, that's a public data request, could request that information. I want to know everybody that's talked to Sherry Mikey Brock about RRAR or anything else. If it's about Heda, ties Heda in, those are data requests that are valid. So the concern oftentimes now, though, is on social media. You'll have, there is a Court of Appeals case that I mentioned here where emails aren't considered a violation of the open meeting law. That was not a case that was published by the Court of Appeals, which means it's the law for that case and that case only. Okay, so that doesn't mean another district court case isn't bound by that necessarily, that decision at all. So you have to be really careful with regard to your emails where you're, and that's why Betsy makes a point. I'm blind copying you guys in here, so you can't reply all to these things. We're trying to, so you don't inadvertently step into a mistake or a problem, okay? So Betsy's trying to watch you and cover you by the way she communicates. Mr. Brzezinski does the same. So wants to keep you guys apprised as to what's going on, but doesn't want Jennifer then giving an information. Well, I think we should do this with regard. Well, no, that's, we're out of bounds, okay? Just communicate back to the individual who provided the information, and they're not part of your body. They're just the staff person that's advising you. Watch your social media posts, because this is a real fluid issue. We'll pick you since you're the president. You start posting issues about, hey, Heda's doing great things here. We're going to a ribbon cutting here. We're doing this or that here. And you're doing them on your private post. Well, that's where a court at this point in time, in my opinion, the U.S. Supreme Court is saying, well, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, whether you've just turned your private posting into a public posting. So be real careful that way with regard to blurring the lines between what you talk about on your, if you want to post for private issues as compared to public issues. I brought this up with the city administrator. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case just in the last couple of years where I believe it's the city manager in Port Huron, Michigan, was really excited about his city. So he posted lots of stuff on his public city manager site. But he posted a lot of stuff on his private site too. Well, then an individual wanted to comment on his private site with regard to how little he thought of some of the things Port Huron was doing. Well, then the city manager blocked that individual from his private person. He got sued, and that case went to the U.S. Supreme Court because the guy said, "You're violating my First Amendment right to free speech," because that's really a public site. So the Supreme Court remanded that case back to say he might be right. On a case-by-case basis, we'll look at how much you really posted with regard to the city versus your private. So be real careful there if you're gonna delve into issues that come before this body or if you're on the city council. That's just an area you wanna just be a little leery of if you wanna go there, if you enjoy posting stuff on social media. That's pretty much my pitch about open meeting and those kinds of issues. I guess I'll turn it back over to Betsy if she wants to finish up with conflict.
Thank you, Andy, for
Yes, very good.
the information.
Excellent. So the only item then is the conflict of interest, to make sure that you've signed that, reviewed it, signed it. If you haven't had a chance to read it, since I sent it out this weekend, feel free to take it home and bring it back signed. That's okay as well. But that's the remaining item I have for tonight. Any questions on all of that, sort of standard, the brass tacks and platform upon which you do your work here for the city of Hibbing?
Well, I guess I do have a question. So let's say there's a personnel issue, and I'm just going to say, let's look Betsy, okay? And we're asked to go into a closed session. Who determines who's going to be in that closed session? I mean, as a member, can I say, I think it's best to have the HR director there. Do we request who should be in part of that closed session? Or is that at the city administrator's decision to do that?
So are you talking about a performance evaluation of Betsy?
Or
We're picking on
something-
Betsy?
I mean, just something as an
Or
example.
that she did something terrible?
No, oh, no,
Well,
I didn't think of
Well,
it.
let's
Two different
say,
things?
I was gonna say, let's say as the liaison to this, from the city designated over, if Greg wasn't sitting next to me here and they had questions about the performance I was supplying to them, I would assume that would be an
Right.
adequate case?
Right, that would be, right. So, and I would say, but I think maybe the HR director should be part of that conversation. Do I have the right as a member to bring that forward, or whose decision is that?
So-
Is it hers?
Well, so it's an performance evaluation of that individual. So unless you think that the HR person is required, I'd say normally you'd stay away from having the HR person involved with regard to one that's specific as to her. Because unless she consents to it. But I think because you're electing to evaluate her, I believe that she has the right, not necessarily, you can't call the shots necessarily. It would be different if you said, well, let's all pick on me.
Yeah.
And Andy's been ripping you off on his billings. And so we want to investigate him or discipline him with regard to that. But for some reason, you'd want to keep me on, even though you could fire me for doing that. But for whatever reason, you want to discipline me or something. Well, then you might be actually needing evidence, information. So therefore, you might need someone like Cassie that's like, we look at Andy's bills and yeah, there's no way he worked, this time frame on this because we saw that he billed us for this as well. There's no way he did that. Well, the city council or this body wouldn't have that information, but they need witnesses to present to chastise. So depending on the type of situation you're in, if you're simply doing an evaluation, the HR person isn't doing the evaluation. You're doing the evaluation of the individual you pinpointed. So now, before you do that evaluation, should you get feedback from the HR as to what to do or what you should cover? Sure. But should they necessarily be a party to it and a member of it? I think the employee has some protections there, whether they're a union employee or not.
Does that answer your question?
No, it made it more confusing, but that's okay. I was just thinking, you want the person that knows the most about any subject beside you, right, when you're talking about it? And and we do a good job at that, but if there's ever a time that comes up that one of the members feels like, well, I think this person would be an asset to listen to, how do we go about that? We just come to you guys and say, have you thought about bringing this person in, right?
Well, and I was just going to remind the EDA board that the city council or the city administrator has designated me as the staff liaison for this body, right? So I am hired by the city administrator who reports to city council. So this board is a little different than maybe some of the other functions.
Would you like me to weigh in?
The only other comment I was going to make, I failed to do it during my presentation, and I'm not picking on this, but Library Board, Public Utilities Commission, Airport Authority, a lot of those people are appointed by the city council. They're all subject to the open meeting law. All the committees of the city, or that the city appoints to, are all subject to the open meeting law. Okay? It's not just the city council or the Heda board. No, those subcommittees, they're subject to the open meeting law. In other words, no private meetings. Fire Commission, same thing.
The only thing that I would add, I think the original question was a closed meeting. Who makes the decision? Who's in,
Right,
who's out?
Right.
There's no necessarily hard and fast rule to that,
Okay.
except for maybe the performance review aspect that Andy had referred to. We try to have the experts in the field in the room to have that conversation. If there's ever a time that the governing body wants somebody specific, I think an email would probably, or a phone call would be the easiest way to do that. I think we're very accommodating as staff, and we would certainly try to meet that,
Yes.
that request.
Right, so my point was, and I agree, I mean, you had staff individuals at a closed session tonight, because they're the ones who, Betsy had the information that she needed to provide you, and other people had economic information to provide you, or legal advice to advise you. I'm not saying that staff can't be there, but when you're doing a specific as to a performance evaluation, then the individual that you're evaluating, they have a little bit of feedback into who should be in the room. Because, especially if it's another employee, okay, all of my information about how I'm doing just got passed on to another employee who's not bound to keep it quiet, so.
And Madam President, members of the board, to follow on to Andy's point, we may at some point ask another consultant who has additional financial acumen to be in a meeting when we're discussing a negotiation for a sale of a property, et cetera, so that we can analyze financials differently and those sorts of things. So at some upcoming meeting, you may see additional consultants in a room as requested by staff to ensure that we're evaluating the deal appropriately.
Right. And I guess that's where I was getting at, is that pathway, how do we do that? If we were the member that would come and say, this person might be beneficial to be in it, we could just send an email to you guys, is
Yep.
what I'm hearing you say.
Yep, yep.
Perfect.
Well, thank you for all the information, because it's very pertinent, you know, that we have this, you know.
And
It's
my
all stuff we
intention
have
is
to
to
do.
bring that once a year back up, just to have this, you know, quick conversation
Yeah.
around it and make
Yeah.
sure that we're all refreshed on that.
Right, definitely need to have that information that we don't even think about sometimes, so. Okay, if that's it,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
we have a motion made by Egan to adjourn, supported by Mayor Hyduk. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.